Happy to be here with you all this week. I'm Ashley M. Coleman, your host, and excited to dig into these publishing streets with you all again for another week. Remember, a little housekeeping before we start. Permission to Write is a membership community for Black and POC writers. Here, we believe in community and accountability over competition. So if you're looking for a space to cultivate your craft, definitely head to permissiontowrite.com to learn more about all that we do. So remember, you can sit with us and we'd be happy to have you as a part of our community. If you have been a faithful listener of this podcast, I have to ask that you take a moment to hit the subscribe button, leave a review, or like this podcast. Listen, we have dreams of paying our current editor, hiring an additional producer, and getting some funding up in this piece. And you can help us do that for free by just telling people how much you enjoy listening to me rant about publishing for 15 to 20 minutes each week. Greatly appreciated. Lastly, I just want to give a heads up that we're pivoting to bi-weekly shows. This is a two-man operation at this point, so shout out to our wonderful editor/producer Dilemma, and it will probably give me less gray hair if I have 2 weeks to prepare these all for you. Especially with adding the video component, it'll be helpful. So remember, you can watch the video on our YouTube channel. Same great content, just every 2 weeks. So let's jump into the show. This is the Permission to Write podcast, and I'm your host, Ashley M. Coleman, author of Good Morning Love. Join us each week as writers discuss more than writing. You'll hear from me as well as the occasional guest on craft, publishing, life, and culture. We hope you enjoy the show. All right, so getting into this week in publishing, in a recent poll by the Authors Guild, 13% of writers admitted that they use AI for things like brainstorming, character development, and outlines. So while AI has been a huge point of contention in the literary community, the tide is the tide turning for authors to see the benefits? I guess that's the question. Are we still upset about AI, or are we actually venturing into uncharted territory to see how it can help us? So, of course, as usual, I'll link to all the articles in the show notes. Joe Biden signed a bill on April 24th that could result in a nationwide ban of TikTok as early as 2025, a platform that has arisen astronomically in popularity. BookTok is a section of the app where authors, readers, and influencers highlight literature. And it has become an integral marketing tool for the publishing industry. It's estimated to have aided in selling 20 million books in 2020 alone. So 20 million books in 2020 alone, which is insane. So what is the result for authors should it all go away? I don't want to know. The American Booksellers Association has filed a motion with the Federal Trade Commission seeking to fix a hole in the FTC's antitrust complaint against Amazon that many in the industry agree needs correcting, that the complaint did not specifically include what Amazon's practices have done to book retailing in general and to independent bookstores in particular. So, we definitely have to look into that because we know that Amazon definitely doesn't put the authors first in their practices. So there is a suit being filed against them. And of course, the independent bookstores want to be added to that because they are greatly affected by it. And then last but not least, the New York Times listed its best books since 2000. And more importantly than discussing their list, I just want to know, do we care about lists in general anymore? Last week, I think there was a story about the importance or lack thereof of those highly anticipated book lists. And the reality is so much of it is relationship based and not actually based on how well the book actually performs or how good the book actually is. So can we actually trust recommendations from these type of book lists? What's the criteria? And how many authors of color are there, right? So those are my questions. Anytime I see best of lists, I'm automatically checking for the POC people. Like, who are we saying is best? So for this week's Given the Option, we're going to do Good Morning Love. And I have dreamed and dreamed about this book getting optioned. And now I feel like I have the perfect leads. So I wanted to include Good Morning Love in our Given the Option segment. Now, I have had to look for other characters because now it's time to get into actual actors that we could see playing these roles. So I am a big mood board creator. And so I always have some type of mood board when I'm writing characters. But a lot of the people that I pulled outside of the leads are not actual actors. So I wanted to dive into who that supporting cast would be outside of the lead roles. So everyone and their mom has easily read the book and said, I could see this on Netflix. I could see this on Amazon Prime. I could see this visually. And so if you're out there listening and you're a production company, the option is still available, okay? So for Tao, I'm going to go Rome Flynn, okay? Rome Flynn, you might have seen him in How to Get Away with Murder, and he's been in a lot of other stuff. I think he's in Chicago Fire or something like that now. He is Tao, and Tao is him, okay? Tao is just effortless. Oh, why is effortlessly evading me? He's effortlessly handsome, smooth, and assured. So I think it was when I finally saw Rome Flynn play a romantic lead in With Love on Amazon that I was like, that's him. Rome also sings. And so I love a lead that does not need to be overdubbed. Do you know what I mean? So they can actually sing the parts. They're a good actor. I think he would be the perfect fit for Tao. Speaking of musicians, her, let's talk about it. She is Carly and Carly is her. And the moment I saw her in her natural hair, because she typically has a lot of other things going on, but I saw her natural, curly, beautiful fro, I was like, there she is. It's imperative to me that Carly is an actress that has a little bit of melanin, so she got to be given brown. And that is key for that character. And her has been slow walking into acting roles. So what a great time to actually jump into a lead and a musical role, which I just think would be an awesome opportunity for her to jump into being a lead actress. She would kill. Okay, so for the best friend Talia, I want to cast my good friend Leslie Lasaint. Shout out to you. Because I feel like she definitely gives me a Talia vibe. And she has spent a lot of time in New York City. I just think, she would really work for that. However, if you want maybe more easily recognizable actresses, I would say China Anne McClain might work for a role like this. Or even Samantha Logan from All American. She gives good sidekick friend energy. I think she would be great for it. For Dylan, I would say Trevor Jackson. Now, much to the chagrin of my mother, who was trying to cast Trevor as Tao, but that just was not giving what I thought Tao was. But I just realized he would be an amazing Dylan. So I was first introduced to him on Grownish. Again, that good hybrid of singer and actor. I think he could easily be Tao's competition. And we just need to hear, we would just need him to tone down some of the faces that he makes when he does his covers. If you've seen any of those covers floating around, a little extra in the faces. But other than that, I think he would be an amazing Dylan. So music producers always seem off in TV and film. So we need a girl that can really give a producer without looking corny. I feel like I cringe so many times at film scenes that actually incorporate making music because the people always are way too corny. So y'all have to give me a suggestion for Red in her character because I'm just not sure who could really pull it off. So let me know. Let me know in the comments who you think can play Red. Honorable mention for this for me are Carly's parents. I was totally thinking of Rick Fox when I was thinking of her dad. I don't know how well he would do as a musician, but that's kind of who I was seeing in my mind, this tall, older guy, but probably a lot of people would still find him handsome. But we do mention that Carly's father has light eyes. So if we had to kind of go that route, which, things change and options is fine, right? Like the person doesn't have to have light eyes. But I would say maybe a Gary Dourdan could play the father, and because he could definitely give mysterious musician guy, right? So either one of those will really work for me, Gary or Rick Fox, depending on how someone will want to go. And then for Carly's mom, this one was tricky for me because I really like the idea of using people who are, like actually Afro-Latina and like getting more representation out there, because I feel like so often our Latino characters are really typecast, right? To look one way. And you just get out in the world and you learn like the diaspora is really big when it comes to Latino people, and they don't always look the same. So it's really important to me that we find somebody really of the Afro-Latina culture. And so maybe somebody like Gina Torres, because she's amazing in everything that she does. But in my mind, Carly's mother had a much deeper skin tone. So I don't know. If you have any thoughts on that, I would love to learn about some more melanated Afro-Latina actresses that we should know. So that is given the option for this week. So we will jump over to our salon topic, which is You're in Charge. So this week, I wanted to start us off with just a little clip. So listen here.
You in charge. I want to hear you say that. Say it.
I'm in charge.
You my partner.
I know.
Say it, I'm in charge.
I'm in charge.
I cannot help but laugh every time I hear that. However, that is what we're going to talk about this week. If you're unfamiliar with that soundbite, it is from the Oscar-winning film Hustle and Flow, where Terrence Howard's character DJ is about to go to jail and tells his hoe Nola, played by Taryn Manning, that she's in charge of the pimping business now. So there are too many things to unpack there with the publishing industry, but mostly let's focus on you're in charge of your writing career and not necessarily the hoe-pimp relationship. So there's no manual that is handed to you after you sign on the dotted line of your book contract. So in addition to trying to write a debut novel that is actually worth anything, you are also doing a lot of learning on the job. Each new step of the process was brand new. But what I realized very quickly was that I was in charge. While your editor is going to walk you through each step, ultimately, you get to decide how you want to show up, right? I've heard stories from other writers that they felt dictated to, but I can only speak to my experience. I realized very quickly from the editing process that most things were suggestions, and I was going to have to decide what things I wanted to keep and what things that I actually wanted to throw away. I think it's very easy as a new author to feel like you have to do every single thing your editor suggests in your edit letter. But the reality is you don't. Now, I know in my case, it behooved me to be open. My editor had a lot more experience than I did at ever writing a full-length novel. So for the most part, I was open to that direction. I've always been, though. I am a writer that appreciates being edited because I know the end result will always be better for it. Don't let the ego hurt your work. That is my mantra when it comes to being edited. And we get more in depth in a later episode about the collaboration between you and your editor. But ultimately, I had this revelation one day that I was still in the driver's seat. Yes, there will be a lot of input from what genre your book is marketed to your cover art to come to really these collective decisions. But it's in their best interest to make sure that you are also happy in those decisions, right? For example, I didn't love the first cover option, but after some back and forth, we came to a mutual agreement on what that should look like. Happy authors are authors that will also want to promote their book, which brings me to the meat and potatoes. Having a publisher does not mean that you will not have to do the work. As someone who has self-published 2 books, having a traditional publisher was definitely a different experience. You have a team. There are people working on your behalf, But what you don't realize is that you will come to an end point, and it will be on you to keep the momentum going for your book. So yes, leading up to my release, there were frequent marketing and publicity calls. The inbox was littered with graphics to approve, opportunities, book clubs, etc., to participate in. And even after the book release, there were appearances at the American Library Association's conference in DC, Refinery 29's inaugural festival in Atlanta, a launch here in Inglewood at the Salt Eaters Bookshop, and, a lot of other great opportunities in between. Then I would say the book came out in June, and by September, I was thinking about, how do I keep this going? How do I keep selling books now that things are a lot quieter in my inbox? Folks have really moved on to their next title. So that's when my self-publishing brain really kicked in. I was used to doing all this stuff by myself. I had done it before for my nonfiction books. So I just had to swing back into the reality that, as great as having a team is with a traditional publisher, if you haven't been picked up in the wave of national book clubs or critical acclaim, it's going to be on you, honey, to keep the party going. But the good news is, coming from the music industry, I know hustle, and I have never been afraid to hustle. So I started by reminding myself that I needed to get out to events. After the work is done, you have to start building that network. You have to go outside and tell people that you wrote a book. One of the best things I could have done was gone to an event in Pasadena hosted by Tracy Thomas of the Stacks Podcast. It was an event where Danielle Smith was one of the guests, and she is one of my heroes from afar based on her history at Vibe and just being an OG in the journalism and writing game. And while I was at the event, not only was I able to meet Danielle for just a fangirl moment, I also met two amazing people, Laura Worrell and Celia Lasky. I recognized Laura just from these internet streets as her book was getting a lot of buzz, her book, Sweet, Soft, Plenty Rhythm. And I just went up and said hello. And thankfully, she actually had a personality, because not everybody does, right? When you randomly go up and say hello to them and that you've heard about their book, right? So she and Celia told me about a Slack group of debut authors that I should join. And it was instant community, and I was so thrilled. Now, this wasn't all about opportunities to promote my book, but I was new to LA, new to authoring, and I couldn't have found a better group of people to simply be around, right? Community is everything, because writing is a solo sport. Most of it is just you and your computer, and you need other people to say, is this right? What is your experience? How did you handle this? Am I being robbed for this advance? You know what I mean? These are the real questions that you need to be able to ask other writers. And it was literally a lifeline for me to really be integrated into a community of writers out here in Los Angeles, especially when so many people really harp on the fact that publishing lives in New York, and that LA, you're only going to find screen or TV writers, but there is a robust literary community out here in LA. So then you just have to start finding ways to work your network as you get out there and meet different people. And, when the book came out initially, I emailed all my friends just saying, hey, I have this book, and please share if you feel inclined, or just buy it if you don't feel inclined to share about it. And so one of my writing friends, Tamika Burgess, who is also a writer, she's a middle grade author. Make sure you go and support her books as well. We did an event that feels like it was a million years ago, actually, in New York when I was back living on the East Coast, for those of us who had personal blogs. And she recommended me to a woman in publishing who was hosting a writing event. And that writing event led me to, it was at a college, and it led me to meet Malik from Malik Books at that event. Now, that event probably had about 3 people in the audience of our panel. But again, I'll get back to how that was important. So just showing up, no matter whether it's 3 or 300 people, is really key to just get yourself ingrained into the literary community for whatever, just to be a fan of the community, just to be a part of the community first and foremost, because we always sell authenticity here at Permission to Write. We are never trying to meet people just for opportunities. But very naturally, as you build community, as you network, you'll be able to find opportunities within that. So that community building just led me to so many opportunities to also keep the lights on, so to speak, for Good Morning Love. From being in conversation with other authors to finding other small opportunities for myself, like the Push to Publish panel that happened at Drexel University, doing a library talk back home on the East Coast, and popping up on smaller podcasts like this one, you know. In between, I was just coming up with as many ideas as I could to share the book on social media and reposting other people that were discovering the book for the first time. Even close to 2 years later, I worked with my husband to produce the actual title track of Good Morning Love, which I'd hoped to do when the book was actually released, but it was never too late to continue promoting the book because there's always people who have no idea that you wrote a book. Now, the reason even smaller events are important is because that chance meeting with Malik led me to the LA Times Festival of Books. He hit me up asking if I would be a part of their schedule for book signings. And I was terrified because who was coming to see me, in the words of David Ruffin, right? But it was an amazing experience. And we had like 2 books left by the finish. And I got to meet so many amazing readers and literary enthusiasts during that time. So it was a great opportunity that, again, really birthed out of a chance event that, you know, didn't necessarily have a lot of people at it, but had a great bookseller there and just continuing to build that relationship. And since then, I've even supported those bookshops, right? I can't walk into a bookstore without buying things because I know how hard it is to be an independent bookstore. I've visited the bookstore. I've patronized the bookstore. These are the things that you really want to do as a writer to give back to the community that gives a lot to you. I tell people all the time that the publishing date is really the starting line and not the finish. Do you want your book to be able to continue to sell copies well after the first week where everyone is hoping that it'll show up on the New York Times bestsellers list? Let's be honest, that will not be everyone's reality, but it doesn't mean that you can't still have a successful writing career if you're willing to dig your heels in. There were things that my publisher did that I could have never done myself. I mean, there was a billboard with my book cover in Times Square. Bucket list moment. But the reality is you and your publisher are partners. You have to bring as much as you can to the table if you want a modicum of success in an industry that has a small number of people at the top and bottom and a vast wasteland of mid-list authors in between. So what are you going to do to set yourself apart if you want to continue doing this thing? Which I don't know about you, but I would like to keep writing books. I would like to not be a one-hit wonder in the book world. So I'm willing to do the things that you need to do in order to be successful and in order to be long-term and actually build a career. I also think being a willing and active participant in your book's success will hopefully make people want to work with you again. Even with the fact that people move around in publishing all the time, you never know who you'll end up seeing again if you change publishers eventually. My goal is for folks to be excited if they see my name show up on the docket. Remember, you're in charge. Say it with me. I'm in charge. Even if you have to say it like your voice is shaking, you're in charge of your writing career. I hope this helps. Remember to send me your publishing and writing questions. I would love to answer those at the end of each show. But in the interim, I'll leave you with a writing thought. The discipline I use to be in company stands me in good stead on the following morning when I must go into my small writing room and face a host of new ideas and headstrong characters, yet keep myself open so they can interact, grow, and become real. And that's from Maya Angelou. Thanks so much for listening, y'all, and I will see you next time. Thank you for listening to the Permission to Write podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. Plug into our community that works to cultivate and amplify the voices of Black writers and writers of color by visiting permissiontowrite.com. We'll see you next time.